Are you a parent or a professional in the autism world who uses bribery or sees other parents and professionals using bribery techniques and getting more problem behaviors and really struggling both at home, in the classroom, and out in the community? Today's guest, Beilli Payne, is a behavior analyst, mom to two girls, one with severe ADHD and one neurotypical. And Beilli Payne just wrote a new book called Behavior Breakthrough. It's excellent. We are going to discuss the book. We're going to discuss some particular procedures like first then. And we are also going to talk about the differences between bribery and reinforcement. And I really hope you stay till the end because I'm going to give you a classic example and a funny story related to bribery towards the end. So it's a great interview. Hope you love it as much as I do. Let's get to Beilli Payne. Well, thank you for joining us, Beilli. It's so nice to have you here.
Such an honor. Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
So I found you as I was scrolling through TikTok, and I saw you with your video, and you had your little book in the corner of the video, and I thought, wow, that's so smart to have your book right on screen, the whole TikTok video. But we're going to get to your book and more about the procedures that are in your book, which is great. Your book is Behavior Breakthrough, excuse me. But before we do that, let's just start out very briefly telling us about your fall into the autism ABA world.
Yeah. So I was working on my master's degree in clinical psychology, and that program was just not really a good fit for me. And I just very, very luckily fell into the hands of a wonderful behavior analyst out of the University of Kansas and got to provide some services for an autism waiver in Kansas, as well as for the University of Kansas Lifespan Institute, where I was a project research therapist. And that's where I fell into the world of applied behavioral analysis and just fell into the right hands of some very, very supportive behavior analysts. And that was just very much a fit for me.
And who was your main mentor or mentors at Kansas?
Yep. Dr. Linda Heitzman Powell and Dr. Katie Hine.
Okay.
They were my primary supervisors. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you switched to a master's in ABA instead?
I didn't. So I finished my master's degree in clinical psychology, and then I just went on to get the certification, knowing that I would remain in the field of ABA. I was working in a state hospital at the time, and I was always doing very behavioral things, and I was servicing individuals with disabilities and autism, and then just went that certification route.
And it's great that you're both now. You're a clinical psychologist and BCBA. So you also that was like 10 years ago. You became a BCBA, and so now you have two daughters. And can you tell us, are they typical? Are they, do they have any developmental disorders?
Yeah, I have both girls. I'm a girl mom. I have a 7-year-old neurodivergent daughter. She's got ADHD, and well as a neurotypical daughter that's 3. So all things girls in my house.
Okay. So as I said, you wrote this book and you published it in December of 2024. So it's really brand new. It's called Behavior Breakthrough, 12 Skills to Transform Behavior at Home and in the Classroom. And like I said, it was on your TikTok little video. And you so nicely sent it to me so I could look at it and read it before this interview, which thank you for doing that. I think it's an excellent book. It's very laid out very well, very easy to read, short chapters. And I prepared a few questions related to reading the book. I think it's very much in line with my Turn Autism Around book. I mean, the things we're going to talk about today, I can pretty much give you the page number, so my audience that has been listening to me for years now, both parents and professionals, I think will really find this book to be great. So why did you write the book, and how complicated was that?
Yeah, so it was COVID times, I feel like it really started for me. Of course, I provide the bulk of my services in person. So going remote during COVID times was a significant challenge. I was a single mom at the time. At that time, my now 7-year-old was a toddler, and I was trying to work from home, and it was not going swimmingly well. It was extremely challenging. And of course, all of my families, which were used to receiving intensive support, were now receiving none. And so we were all desperate for support. And so I started just sharing just my help, helpful tips and tricks, if you will, on Facebook. And my purpose was to just reach my local audience of people in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And it just kind of grew from there. That it wasn't just Bowling Green, Kentucky at that time that really needed the help and the strategies, it was many more people. And so it kind of just grew from there of this online space. And I've always been really passionate with caregiver training, and I have consulted in a couple of school districts for almost 10 years as well, providing behavior analytic services. So I'm so passionate about training educators and parents that really, I guess maybe in a different way. I think sometimes we're so quick to just give the end all solution where a lot of the skills that we really are so important we miss along the way, kind of those prerequisite skills, if you will, things that we need parents and caregivers to know first, things that we needed teachers to know first. And so I think that was really my goal of the book, was just bringing to light what I had been sharing online, and hopefully just reaching more people. And I will also say that I will never claim this as like my book or a book that I wrote. You'll see at the very bottom there, Jen Lil Brown. She is what would be considered a ghostwriter. So she took my audio content only and put this into what is pretty well written. That is something that I didn't do. So it is my content, but put together so well by this ghostwriter, Jen Lil Brown, but didn't want her to remain a ghost. So her name there on the cover as well.
Yeah, with my first book, The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders, it's 2007. And I have a ghostwriter, or really a book doctor, and
Yeah.
she helped me really get it in writing, Tracy Rasmussen. And it was important to her that she be on the cover, and I didn't have any problem with that. It's just, and then for my Turn Autism Around book, I did have a book doctor, ghostwriter, and a lot of things on audio, but it's still a ton of work. But I do like that, and I just wanted to, give a shout out um, to the ghostwriters and book doctors that help us get our information out, because it is a different writing style to publish a book versus, certainly a journal article or a blog. It takes a lot, and so I think more people should go that route.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
absolutely. We all have our area of expertise, and writing the book alone would have definitely not been mine. So, best to collaborate when we need to.
yeah, yeah. So, your book has 12 basic behavioral principles that you wanted to get out there, and, have both parents and professionals learn more about. So, we're going to talk about, and we're going to link in the show notes the way to get the book. Your website is baileypayne.com.
Yep.
And that's BAILEYPAYNE for those of you that are just listening. So it's a very easy name to say, but hard to spell for some people, I would think.
Sure.
But
Yep.
we'll link that in the show notes, so it's no problem. Um, so let's talk about 3 behavioral principles that each have their own chapter in your book. And they also have some space in my Turn Autism Around book as well. So the first one is called First Then. So first you do this, and then you get the more preferred activity.
Yep.
So I just described it in one sentence. I'm sure that you have a bigger, description of that. You want to tell our audience?
Sure. Right. So it's called First Then Contingency. And I think it's I think so much of my book, I hope, really translates not just the what it is, because I think we can very quickly explain what things are. But I think if we're wanting to change our habits and we're wanting to change how we talk to our children, that requires so much emotional and mental work to change our habits. And so I hope that really I take a deep dive into why. Why should I think about offering first you do something that you don't necessarily want to do and then something more preferred will come later? Why? Why work on structuring my environment in this way? And I think it's so important that sometimes very small tasks can feel extremely overwhelming and it can feel like this is going to last forever. I don't have the skills to do this. This is way too challenging for me. This is awful. This is boring. This is challenging. Whatever the feeling of it is that makes me not want to do this task. I think that then just by providing that light at the end of the tunnel signals this won't last forever. This can be small. You can do this, and something better is coming after, which is the whole concept of first then contingencies. That first you are responsible, right? When you do something that you don't necessarily want to do but is necessary, and then you get to schedule your activities that's more preferred for you.
And this isn't something just for kids with autism or ADHD. This is a behavioral principle. I know it as the pre-Mac principle. First you eat your peas and then you get your dessert. It's in lots of books on behavior change. A really famous book, a really bestseller for years now, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's like, build in, if you're like a coffee drinker or you like reality TV, build in your exercise before
Yeah.
your coffee, or build in your cleaning before the reality TV. And it just makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think
Um,
it's the whole concept of teaching responsibility. Really, it's that delayed gratification.
but I have seen first then in schools where it doesn't go that well. So it, it's very, so tell me some things that could go wrong or mistakes you see people make with first then.
Yep. I think sometimes we can just look at everything in the world as too black and white, right? Where if I start with first we're going to do this, then this, and that first contingency, that first we're going to do 3 problems of homework, or first we're going to brush your teeth, whatever that looks like for you in your household, sometimes that's too big. And sometimes there has to be room to modify that to still get the then contingency, right? Of course, we want to do that early on before we, experience big amounts of protest. But I think sometimes, especially in schools, we get so black and white about it that it becomes almost a white knuckling situation of, no, you're going to do the first, and we're not moving on until you complete this first activity, or first we're doing this routine, whatever it is. And I think then it just becomes a battle. And that's not good. That's not the idea of first then contingency, right? It's about providing light at the end of the tunnel. It's about encouraging cooperation. It's about making something feel more digestible for the student. And so when you get into this white knuckling of the situation of, no, I'm waiting you out and we're following through with it, at that point, you've lost the power of the prevention strategy and how it's supposed to work. So I see that where we get a little bit too black and white with it. And we also require, if I've never gotten my child to brush their teeth for the last 2 solid weeks without protest behavior, I don't want to start with the whole routine. First, I just want you to walk to the bathroom, and then I'm going to turn your favorite song on, right? Breaking tasks down into much smaller steps instead of thinking about it too broadly of, okay, first then you don't want to brush your teeth. We're doing the whole task, when sometimes the whole task is too big. We need to break down using the first then contingency, this pre-Mac principle idea, in smaller bits.
Yeah, one thing I liked about the chapter, and I didn't read the whole thing cover to cover, but I did read a pretty good amount. And one of the things I liked that you said in the first then chapter was, wait for a child to approach you and say, I want to, play with Play-Doh. And then you say, Yes, we can play with Play-Doh. First, just clean up the toy box, and then I'll get the Play-Doh out and we can play together. So I think one of the mistakes I see is having this rigid system, especially in schools that I've seen, where we use first then all day long. The child doesn't really care about the then as much as they need to. There's not motivation in there. Same thing with visual schedules. I am not against visual schedules, but when you put the whole thing up and they get to the bad part and they flop on the ground and then you keep the demand on, it can turn into not a good situation. So I remembered when I was reading that, I remembered my typical son, Spencer, the first time he was sitting on the toilet. We were trying to potty train. He had never pooped on the potty. And he's like, Mommy, I want to play hide and seek. And I go, first poop, and then we'll play hide and seek. And he did it. And we played hide and seek. And then he pooped on the toilet from then on. I mean, like, that was amazing. I kind of forgot about that until you brought it up. But I do think that, so some of the mistakes I've seen is like being too rigid with it, not using the child's actual natural reinforcement. And not every child can come up to you and say, I want to play hide and seek, or I want to play with Play-Doh. And so for our learners who are non-vocal or minimally vocal, we're going to have to be a lot better at using this. And maybe it's not in visuals, maybe because I feel like if you put out a visual, then it is more black and white. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just this, hey, let's build it in. Like kids that have problem behaviors on the playground. This is classic because I used to work in schools many, many years. And kid having problems on the playground, my first question is, does he want to be on the playground or does he want to be inside? Because some kids don't want to go out on the playground and they have problem behavior. Some kids don't want to come back in. But either way, we need to build in we need to build in good things happening throughout the day, both inside and outside on the playground, and so I think maybe from my experience, if you're just starting out with First Then, read your book, read the chapter that describes it, and really, maybe do the dance without them knowing
Yeah.
that you're doing the dance.
Right, exactly. I think it's kind of twofold. In my house, I have two highly frequent requesting children, right? That are, I mean, I feel like I can't even finish getting the first activity that's been requested before we're already requesting 3, 4, and 5. And so sometimes this first then contingency can just slow that down. And it doesn't have to be by vocal speech, right? You can be gesturing to what you want. And then I can be pointing to this. And then I can take you to this room. And now I can hand you the remote. There's lots of different ways that we can respond to requests. But then, just like you said, now I have received a clear notification what my child naturally wants, what is valuable to them, and what is likely going to increase their behavior because they've shown me in some way. And so using that as an opportunity, okay, now first do the activity that I really need you to do that hasn't been done yet, or use it as that learning opportunity. Okay, first practice this with me. We're working on this skill or whatever it is, as those things naturally arise.
Yeah. And you do talk about in the First Then chapter, you talk about transitions and how it's really good for transitions, because a lot of kids, going out to the playground or being on the iPad is a 9 or a 10 out of their scale of 1 to 10. And then it's like, all done, blank, time for, which is a 2 or a 1, time to do math. And so all throughout my book, I talk about how we need to keep the reinforcement really high so that we're going from a 9 to an 8 to back to a 10 to a 7. We're not using the word work. We're not, making it sound like it's bad, and we're not having it bad. So we need reinforcement during dressing, and we need reinforcement during bath time, and we need we need to build up skills all at the same time. So I do have a lot about transitioning in my book, Turn Autism Around, starting at page 90. with some different techniques that all go into this. Dangle the carrot before the problem behavior. So you do talk about it first, then. You don't want to be presenting child's on the floor and then you're repeating. First, we have to do the cleaning up the toy box. But there's not a real win-win in that scenario where a child cries or whines or bites or flops. So we have to really prevent throughout the day.
Yep. At that point, you're just riding the wave, right? Once behavior starts, we're just riding the wave, and then we have to try again and catch it earlier with prevention the next time.
Yep. Ride the wave, do the dance, figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're just going to talk about one more big chapter, because I don't want this to go too long. And I mean, it is a very good book, Behavior Breakthrough. I want people to get it and to definitely read it. But I think the next big thing that a lot of people mess up, that's in chapter 5, page 69 of my book, is bribery versus reinforcement. You have a whole chapter on that. So why don't you tell our listeners, what is the difference between, I know a lot of parenting experts, they say we use no bribes, no threats, no punishment, which I'm fine with, but then they say, and no rewards.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. So can you tell us the difference between reinforcement and bribery?
Yeah. And I think a lot of feedback that I get is reinforcement didn't work for me. That's bribery. I don't believe in bribing my child. And so I think sometimes there's a confusion between reinforcement and bribery. And then sometimes we inadvertently and accidentally turn reinforcement into bribery, and then that messes things up too. And so there is so much confusion, and it is complex, right? Nobody does that on purpose. It is a complex concept. And so the difference is reinforcement serves to get that behavior to happen again. The sole purpose of reinforcement is noticing the good, delivering some reinforcement so that good behavior, that pro-social behavior, that desired behavior happens again. Ooh, my child, communicated this functionally. I want to reinforce that. Ooh, we've pooped on the potty. I want to reinforce that. We sat 5 minutes at the dinner table tonight. I want to reinforce that, right? That's the idea of reinforcement, where bribery is once that problem behavior, that undesired behavior, that challenging behavior starts, I offer something good for the sole purpose to get it to stop. So there's the difference. Reinforcement is I'm delivering an outcome after that desired behavior to get it to happen again. Whereas bribery is I'm willing to talk about something you like. I'm willing to reference something you like. I'm willing to give you something you like if you stop doing this challenging non-preferred behavior.
So you give some examples in your book under bribery and reinforcement. So can you give me an example of bribery at the grocery store?
I mean, that's the tall tale example. We've all heard it. But I think we have to, that's our reference point. If I want to, and let's just normalize.
Well, give our listeners exactly what bribery is at the grocery store.
Yes, right. That tall tale example of we're in the checkout line and the child is, crying and screaming and they're wanting that candy that's right there in front of them. And it's humiliating. This does happen to all parents and caregivers in public, right? So I want my child to calm down. It's also really aversive as a caregiver for my child to be having a large meltdown in a public space. So I give him the candy to get the behavior to stop. So there's your age-old example of in the grocery store, I'm willing to give you what you want, but it wasn't offered before. There was no plan before we went into the grocery store of if you have nice words, keep your hands to yourself, whatever, that you'll get the candy. I only offered the candy once the problem behavior started to get it to stop.
And the other part of that is, or they can offer something else highly valuable.
Yes.
Like if you calm down, we can drive through and get you something, or we can get the iPad in the car.
Yep. I'll give you my phone.
Yeah. I'll give you my phone. Anything you add to that is reinforcement.
Yep.
And it's going to increase the probability that they're going to cry, not just for candy, but for everything they want. And that's why bribery, it happens as soon as, when the child's having, and they don't have to be in full meltdown. They can
Right.
just be whining and crying. I actually have a good example. Max is in my book a lot. He's definitely in a couple of chapters. And, and when I was working with Max, I was actually I was like once a month, just consulting kind of thing. And he had problem behaviors in the community and in the grocery store and that sort of thing. So I went with the therapist and mom, and Max went from completely not talking. The only thing he said was pizza, and he didn't even like pizza when I started with him, up to like fully conversational, which was amazing. He never got the diagnosis of autism. Really great story, right? But we're in the grocery aisle, and Max is whining about something. Not a full meltdown, but whining, and mom knows I'm standing there and the therapist, and she's like, no, you can't have it. So Max takes off for the lobby of the grocery store. Mom's trying to check out. I go to the lobby, like, I've been working with this kid for like 3 years. Max, absolutely not. Let's go. And, he held my hand. I didn't have to like carry him or force him, but, he knew, like, I was not playing. I'm like, absolutely not. This is unsafe. Let's get back to your mom. And I go back to the mom and the therapist still checking out. And Max, who's fully verbal by this point, he's only 4 or 5. He crosses his arms. He says, how comes every time Mary's not here, I get what I want? And every time she's here, I can't have it. And they both looked at me and started laughing. And I'm like, this is classic.
Busted. That's funny.
Because they would use a lot of bribery.
Yeah.
And, to turn it off and that sort of thing. And it's hard. And it's like not everything is going to go well. And sometimes if you're in an unsafe situation, you've got a 12-year-old flopping on Walmart parking lot, you bribe all the way. Get them into a safe situation. So those nuances are really, really tough. But just read Bailey's book, read that chapter, read my book, read my examples. I have a bribery versus reinforcement visual we can put in the show notes too. So bribery is not planned out. It's reactive. It follows problem behaviors, and it often involves negotiation. Behavior worsens. There's only short-term change. Whereas reinforcement is planned out, it's adult-led, it follows good behavior, pro-social behavior, it's delivered with praise. Anytime you deliver any kind of reinforcement, it's delivered with praise, and you will see long-term changes. And it's the kind of thing that you can see very quickly if you start putting these procedures. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be every time, but if you at least start noticing, for anybody listening, next time you bribe, or even if you're at Walmart or at the grocery store, listen to other parents. They're bribing all the time. So you can get some good examples and think, okay, that was bribery, planned out, ready to go. We're going to go through the grocery store. We're going to, at the end, get something, or get in the car, and on the way home, we're going to go to the park. It doesn't all have to be edibles just because you're in the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think it's just having that awareness. And once those undesired behaviors start, just being so aware of, am I doing something to try to get this to stop? And I think that will lead us to think more about, am I accidentally, inadvertently bribing?
Yeah. So what do you think are the main themes in behavior breakthrough that you use for your typically developing daughter, your daughter with ADHD, and your clients or students with autism? What are the main principles?
I think it's just what we attend to is likely what we're going to get more of. I mean, it's just such a foundational concept of the behaviors that I notice, the behaviors that I comment on, what I say to my children, what I state my expectations to be. It's more about my behavior, right? And so it's more about what specifically about my behavior is resulting in behaviors of my children. And so I hope it just guides a behavioral understanding of why are certain behaviors happening. And I think a deeper dive maybe than just function. Of course, becoming aware of why behaviors are happening related to function is in there, but just like this first in contingency and being aware of bribes, having this understanding of behavioral concepts to guide how I say things, what I talk about, how I give directions, kind of just more in a positive light so that I get more positive behaviors, those more desired behaviors. That works for all humans, our significant others, our spouses, our coworkers, right? It's human behavior, it translates.
And you have a whole chapter on being positive. You have a whole chapter on functions of behavior. It really is a great book. So I'm thrilled to, have you on the show to talk about it. We're going to put it in the show notes. You also have a freebie. We can put it in the show notes, baileypayne.com. And before I let you go, part of my podcast goals are not to just help the kids, but help the parents and professionals listening be less stressed and lead happier lives. So, what are some stress management tips or self-care tools that you use on a daily basis to really keep yourself happy and as less stressed as possible?
Yeah, I feel like that's such a loaded question, especially because I've been a single mom where I didn't have access to support. And so, there have definitely been times in my life where I viewed the only time I'm ever going to relax is if I'm on some lavish beach and away from my child. And that would have never been possible at that time of my life. It's not realistic. It wasn't attainable. And so I think it's so important to just notice the little things that we probably already do on a daily basis. And once we start to label them and be aware that, in fact, that is self-care, that in itself can be a little bit healing when we're so desperate for a break, like taking that extra long shower, taking a moment to just make a list of everything I'm so grateful for, listening to songs that put me in a positive mood as I'm driving to work. I think it's so important for us to be aware of the little things that we do naturally do for ourselves, but once we become aware that, hey, that I am doing that for me, that is for me, that benefits me, it can feel a little bit bigger than actually what it is.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's been a real pleasure meeting you, Bailey. I'm sure we will connect in the future. We have very similar philosophies, and I know my audience is going to love you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Such an honor.